use the word treatment, that when you see the person as well, you know, and you're treating them, you need to see them that way. And I think, again, it's part of what you're saying, that you saw yourself in a different way, not what the doctors are telling you. Yeah, because most people go home depressed and die in half the time, you know, that the doctor has told them. I mean, I remember my wife was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis maybe 50 or 60 years ago, and I was told what was going to happen to her, and I'd have 5 children, all alone, no wife. Well, it was 63 years of marriage, you know, it didn't happen. But it taught me something, you know, about the future and having faith and a lot of things that we can do, which includes, you know, medicine, alternative therapies. It's just all the things that are available, but your view of the future. And also I have to mention parenting. When you discuss that, that's a big part of why you experienced all these health problems. I got to mention, since you're from Boston, Harvard students were asked, this is a study years ago, did your parents love you? If they said no, by the time they were middle-aged, 98% had suffered a major illness. If they said yes, only 24% had suffered a major illness. So much of our, well, even the title of the show, Mind Health Matters, it is trying to say to people, your mind's health matters. You know, it's not just about the mind and about health. It's mind health matters. And, you know, you're one of the, I must say, the few who overcome it. And I think writing poems, I have a collection of poems too. And forgive me for not stopping talking, all right? But I promise one more
I love hearing your stories,
because
and your wisdom
I
is
kept
wonderful.
a journal and, you know, started writing poems because I knew keeping all this stuff inside of me was going to get me into trouble. But it was so unpleasant what I was writing about, you know, all these terrible feelings, what happened to people in the hospital, things I couldn't cure, and I would hide it because I didn't want the kids or my wife reading it. And then one night, it was late, I was tired, I forgot to hide it. And the next day, my wife said, Bobby said, Bernie, there's nothing funny in your journal. And I said, my life isn't funny, what are you talking about? And then she started telling me jokes that I told her and the kids at dinner. See, the funny things that happened in the hospital, I was telling them. And I realized that never got in my journal. And boy, that simple thing that she said to me, thank God I didn't hide the journal that night. You know, the funny things were never in my journal. So I began to remember the good things too. And that's when your poetry changes, if you know what I mean.
Well, you know, Bernie, you mentioned about hiding. And that's one of the biggest things that I did was that I hid. You know, I was ashamed of what happened to me. And keeping all of that inside of me, it caused my body to shut down. And my soul got, I protected myself, and it was wonderful, but my soul was withering because I'd forgotten who I was as a child of God. I'd forgotten how much beauty and joy and goodness there is in the world. And once I started writing the poetry, what happened was my poems, like they would start out maybe in a dark place, and then it would flip. And it would turn into something light and positive and beautiful. And even The Gift of Polio, which was one of the early poems that I wrote. And it was being grateful and saying, okay, I'm going to take this challenge and I'm going to find the gift. And one of the greatest gifts that I got from when I contracted paralytic polio was actually meeting my guardian angel, because I had an out-of-body experience when I was 5. I was you can imagine, a very precarious situation, having a mother who's totally numbed out on prescription pain medication, but a 5-year-old doesn't know that, and she's just staring at me. I was paralyzed from the neck down on the couch and smoking a cigarette, and I had this out-of-body experience where I was reeled up in a well bucket. And I met this being. And then I remember making a choice to return to my body. And when I came back, I had this sense of safety, even though I was still very, you can imagine, absolutely terrified. I had a sense that somehow this was all going to turn out okay.
Yeah.
And it did, which is the amazing thing.
Yeah, I think we're identical twins. When I was 4 years old, I took a toy apart, imitating some workmen in our house, and put pieces in my mouth, aspirated them. I was choking to death and left my body. And truthfully, I don't know how you felt with that experience, but I was very upset when I didn't die, because the boy on the bed, you see, that's the other thing. I always say the boy on the bed. I never would say me. I looked at myself. I always said the kid on the bed or the boy on the bed, and I realized after years, you're not the body. You know, there's more to you than that body. So that kid was dying. And then he vomited. I always say, I think my angel came in and did a Heimlich maneuver, because he vomited and all the pieces came out. You know, he had like a seizure and vomited. And then he was breathing, and I was back in the body again, mad as hell. I was mad at God because I had decided to be dead. And I yelled out, "Who did that?" And, you know, this may all sound crazy to people, but I'd say don't be afraid of dying. You know, when you leave a body that is no pleasure to be in, you'll be perfect again. And there's a book called Mindsight, written by a friend of mine years ago. He looked at people who had been born blind and had a near-death experience, and they all could see again when they left their bodies. Yeah. And you can imagine how upset some of them were. I mean, one I remember had a terrible car accident, left his body in the autumn, and he was overwhelmed by the beauty, you know, of all the leaves, and then they resuscitate him, and he was mad as hell that he couldn't enjoy the beauty anymore because he was blind again. But, I mean, these are all things that we will learn, and I think from those lessons, our life evolves, and you're, what should I say, mature enough and willing to evolve and have the labor pains, as many people aren't.
Exactly. This is so interesting, and we're going to take a quick break, and we will be right back with more with Dr. Bernie Siegel and Mary McManus.
Join Dr. Bernie Siegel on Mind Health Matters every week, Wednesday through Friday, 12 p.m. and 12 a.m. Eastern Time on Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Bernie will draw from his inspirational personal journey, offering us special nuggets of his sacred wisdom. Listen in as Bernie reminds us to be fully engaged in life.
Omega Institute, offering workshops, retreats, and online learning dedicated to awakening the best in the human spirit. For 40 years, Omega has been a gathering place for great thinkers, creative talent, spiritual teachers, and social visionaries. With 390 workshops to choose from, Omega offers something for everyone. Located in Rhinebeck, New York, just 90 miles north of New York City, Omega's natural environment and quiet pace allow for extraordinary experiences to unfold. Learn more at eomega.org.
Dr. Bernie Siegel's writings and the 12 books he's published so far reflect his passion to reach people struggling with all of life's challenges. His latest, A Book of Miracles, inspiring true stories of healing, gratitude, and love, is both riveting and belief-expanding. Bernie has produced wonderful resources for everyone, like 365 prescriptions for the soul, daily messages of inspiration, hope, and love, and faith, hope, and healing. Bernie's books also include those like Love, Magic, and Mud Pies, a great resource for parents, and delightful, loving stories like Buddy's Candle to help children of all ages cope with the loss of a loved one, be it a pet or a parent. To purchase Bernie's books, CDs, or DVDs, go to BernieSiegelMD.com. And while you're there, empower the mind, body, and spirit with Bernie's heartwarming articles.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
Mary, one thing I wanted to mention for everybody, because I wrote poems too, and I would read them to people, and they'd say, it doesn't rhyme.
Right.
I say, that's not my definition of poetry. It was getting it out and expressing myself. I didn't worry about rhyming. And I wondered how you felt, what you wrote, how you put it together, where it came from. Let's put it that way.
Well, that I was just going to say, Bernie, that's really funny you said that about rhyming, because shortly after I started recovering from the full body paralysis, I was able to start physical therapy. And my physical therapist, her name's Miss Holly, she was way ahead of her time, because what she'd do is, before she'd take me in for my excruciating physical therapy sessions, she'd have me choose a Dr. Seuss book from the table in the waiting room. And we'd read it together, and then she'd take me into the treatment room. I can still picture this like it was yesterday. It's just such an imprint on my heart and soul. She'd take off my leg brace. She'd start with the woolen blankets, the Sister Kinney method, which it was what they needed to do in order to coax the muscles back to health. And while she was working on me, I invariably chose the Cat in the Hat. While she was working on me, she'd say, the sun did not shine, it was too wet to play. And she said, now it's your turn. And she'd have me recite in tandem with her to Dr. Seuss. Well, do you know the first poems that I started to write were in the cadence of Dr. Seuss? They all rhymed, and they were in that cadence. And it was as though what healed me when I was 5, and Dr. Oliver Sacks actually did a thing on WGBH about music, the music we listened to as children. And then as adults, they put on the music and they did an MRI, and it lit up like a Christmas tree in that part of the brain. And so I think that's what I drew from. And then over time, it was more free verse. But my initial poems were all in rhyme, and they were in that cadence, which I think is just absolutely incredible.
Yes, it is. Yeah. I mean, I always tell people I got 1 C in 4 years of college, creative writing.
Now you're the author of how many books, Bernie?
Oh, I don't know.
I think that's
about
funny.
14 or so. But, I'll see, again, where humor helps us to heal, too. If you have a sense of humor, I mean, people have to understand this. This is all science and chemistry. That one student down at University of South Florida told his professor for his thesis he wanted to have actors come in and be in comedies and tragedies and draw their blood to show the effect. And his professor thought it was kind of nuts that, what difference does it make if they're acting? Well, it made an enormous difference. He drew their blood while they were acting comedies and while they were acting tragedies, including murders of their family members and things like that. And if you were laughing, your immune function went up and your stress hormone levels went down. And if you were doing a tragedy, the opposite happens. And people have to, mind health matters. That what's going on in your mind makes a big difference. And when I began to learn that, I carried it into my practice as a surgeon. Acting silly, getting kids and adults to laugh, saying things that made no sense. And more often the kids, I think, wanted to say to their parents, "You going to let him operate on me?" The way he behaved. Adults would laugh and be thankful. They say thank you. The part I remember most is you got me to laugh, and, I wasn't afraid anymore. Because you can't be fearful when you're laughing. And I say people need to remember that. Nobody's ever upset at you if you make them laugh, no matter what they're facing. And I think the poetry does the same thing. It brings out of you feelings, but turns them into something creative and something you learn from. Yeah.
And I've been so blessed that people who've read my poetry, especially people who are dealing with an illness, have said it's just they felt they felt the transformation when they read my poetry.